Okay, welcome back to McCarthy Performance. We have the 1957 283 in the Hone. Um, Being that this engine had been blasted, it was really hard to assess the cylinder walls. It does a very good job of hiding how bad the walls are. At that point in time, I didn't feel comfortable boring it because there wasn't a lot to clean up. The walls had been used, they had been oversized. They could have been a forged piston type race engine. Don't know the history of this engine. But what happens is, uh, you can take out a little bit with the boring bar, but you got to make sure you got enough to clean up. These bores can be in the block perfectly straight up and down from the deck, or they can vary a little bit. Now, the deck was fairly square on this, but I don't know who did the boring last, if they referenced off the oil pan rail or if they referenced off the deck of the block. Now, I reference off the oil pan rail, and a lot of times I have to find the cylinder wall. And what I mean by finding the cylinder wall is to assume that the cylinder wall is perfectly straight with the deck or perfectly straight with the oil pan rail. Seldomly, there's not both. So I'm putting the decks with the BHJ uh, relative to the deck surface then. So that takes the guesswork out of the oil pan rail, and it puts the camshaft and crankshaft into the center line, and then the decks are squared. So what's that mean? Well, that means that you can bore this, and you might not have enough to clean up all the way down at the bottom. You could get a shadow line. You can start the bore up and you can center here, but that doesn't guarantee that you're not going to have any of this in the block. So, usually if it's a standard bore block and nobody's fooled with it, you can usually straighten it out and bore it and not have a shadow line, depending, of course, how bad the deck is. A lot of times it's just easier to put the diamonds on the hone and hone it out. And what that's going to do is it's going to follow the cylinder bores that are there already. That's going to allow you to clean up completely and not have to have a shadow line, or maybe possibly even go down halfway and find out that the bore is way over here, and now you're putting a sleeve in the block, and you don't want to do that. So it's sometimes easier just to hone it with diamonds. Now, my machines are manual. It's easier in one respect. It's easier because you know that chances of cleaning up all the way is going to be very good. But it's a lot of work. It's a lot of manual stroking. But that's what we did on this, because we just didn't know where the cylinder bores were started off of. If it was bored on the deck, which was off a little bit, not a lot, but it was off a little bit, or how true is their machine? Was there a bunch of crap underneath it when they bored these? So it's easier because this thing's going to follow the bores. It swivels. The boring bar ain't going to swivel. And so what that means is that my machine, my Rottler, does center off the oil pan rail. I just want to make sure that you understand. I don't want to get you confused. Some boring bars center up on a cradle. I'll show you the cradle. Okay, that's how my machine centers up. And a lot of the old portable machines centered up on the deck. Well, I've squared the deck, and I shim my cradle. So I put a dial indicator on the deck, and you've seen me do that, and I'll dial indicate the deck until it's 0. And then I'll put the cylinder wall straight down. And most of the time, it'll clean up. But on a used bore, let's say going from a 30 used bore to a 40, it's just a lot easier to use the cylinder hone and use diamonds. And because you might not have enough to take out. It might not clean up all the way you get a shadow line. So that's kind of what I was saying. I hope you can understand that. I'm not trying to confuse anybody. So we're setting up on the original bore up here. If it was a little bit more wore out, I may set up, I do occasionally set up where the ring stops. This is not horrible, but I like to set up where the factory bored it the first time. I do have the BHJ bore true, but I seldomly use that. I don't feel there's really a need for that on this particular application. You know, if I was doing an aftermarket bow tie block or a world block or something, and I was taking over 100 thousandths out, I may, you know, have the option of moving the cylinder bore a little bit. But with this, I center up with the fingers, and then I go in with a dial indicator. I've mentioned this before, so I'll sweep half the hole, and where I'll move the head because it's afloat in its floating position. I can put it right here, which will be kind of a neutral position, and then of course clamp is locked. Before I get into that, after it comes off the mill for the BHJ true deck, I zero up on my deck. Then I find my center hole with the fingers, and they'll get you pretty close, but I like to be right on the money. Then I'll put a dial indicator on it and sweep half the hole. So this one's saying that that's a thousandths right there. And back here, I'm basically about the same. So the gauge, if I move it a thousandths, it should be 0, 0. And it's not. So we'll have to move it a little bit more. And that's not a problem because we'll just put it in the neutral position. And I'll just tap on the boring bar a little bit. Let's see if I could get into a little bit better focus. It don't like me moving around, see? So we'll clamp it down there, and we'll say that we're probably close to a thou. Now, it looks like somebody tried to hone this block, and it looks like they might even took a ridge reamer around this. They didn't do a very good job because, well, you can't do a very good job with a ridge reamer. It usually tears the hell out of the bores, but you can see some marks here. So, but surprisingly, it's pretty much round. So we're gonna center up here. And we are pretty close to 0. We're within a thousandth of an inch. Now I noticed when I turned it half the distance, we're off just a little bit. So I'm going to tap that just a little bit, and then I'll lock it down, and we'll call that close because we're within a thousandths right now. Okay, let's check it again. Check it again. And we're going to call that close enough. So that's how I do it. It goes a little quicker when I'm not explaining it, but this is how I set up my rottler. So the boring is all done on the 350. Going to hone it next. Thank you for watching.